Trump winning this election itself, what does it mean for us as investors, and does it mean that our portfolio will be affected greatly? Just an overview of what we'll be covering today is that with Trump being in the president's role, these are the likely things that he would like to change. We'll be talking more on the corporate tax cut that he would like to have, that he wants to reduce from a 21% to a 15%. How would that help US as a whole, and how would it impact corporates or businesses? Right, we also talk about the tax that he would like to clamp down, because he's seeing that a lot of people are importing stuff over, they're buying stuff outside of US. Nobody is really consuming or like buying US products, which is why he thought that it would be a good idea. Let's say we would just increase the tax since you guys are buying from outside. When things come in, we tax it so that we can get some revenues from the country, for the country itself. But at the same time, I believe this action that he wants to do is very negative, because it's going to have a lot of implications, which we'll dive deeper into it. And then, of course, with Trump being the president, he also talked about he would like to have a lot of deregulations in different sectors, such as your financial side, your crypto side, and also the environmental side, because he feels that the Inflation Act that the Biden administration came out with, right, was like a green scam, right? So with that in mind, he has this slogan that he has pushed out recently. It's called "Drill Baby Drill," right? So what it means is also that he would like to focus more on the oil industry as well. Okay, then last two, we'll talk a little bit about the defense sector as well as the energy sector, since he would like to pull out from the Paris Agreement and all that whatnot. First up, let's talk about the corporate tax cut from a 21 to 15%. How would that be good, or is it bad? If let's say we put ourselves as investors, as the people owning the business, of course, having lower tax, paying lesser tax is a good thing, right? But there is a downside to it, and let's go through it right now. Okay. Yes, the reason why he wants to decrease the tax rate from 21 to 15% is because he wants corporates to have more profits, and with companies having more profits and more cash on hand, he would like these companies to use it to grow, to invest in, and that way he would like that to stimulate the economic growth. If it makes sense, type in a 1 in the chat. Makes sense, right? Okay, company will got more money, then they will, let's say, like Tesla's example, they will create more manufacturing plants, and by having more manufacturing plants, they can hire more people, and then people for the headquarters, when they go over as a managerial, their wages increase, and this actually stimulates the whole economy. Naturally, it's a good thing. But let's not forget that when companies have profits, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will actually convert it and invest into growth for the infrastructure. Why do I say so? Because if you see companies from the previous sharings and whatnot, there is something that companies likes to do to increase the value of their company, but they don't expand in their size. And that is, to buy back the shares, issue dividends, and these two things essentially don't really stimulate economic growth. If you understand this, type in a 3 in the chat right now. Okay, this is exactly what Clement actually shared as well. So if the companies don't use it to expand into more jobs hiring, creating like more factories or whatnot for the physical kind of manufacturing space, right, then it totally defeats the purposes. And to add on to this dilemma is that when they reduce this, when Trump wants to reduce from 21 to 15%, right, what this means is that over for the next 10 years, it is estimated that the revenue generated from the corporate tax side for US is going to drop about $200 billion. Okay, it might not mean much, but what this has is some implications on it. And the implication is this: every year, the US government would like to carry out their programs and some operations in terms of benefiting certain industries, certain age groups, certain demographics of people. And all these things need money, right? All these things need money. So where do this money come from? It comes from all the taxes, let's say from individual income to payroll to corporate tax, all this stuff. It all comes from here. When the government wants to reduce the corporate income from reduce the tax that they're getting from the companies is essentially squeezing from 9% to, let's say, 87654. I don't know what percent, how drastic it will be. But having lesser income, but they still have to carry out the operations means something. Means where do they get this money from? They will probably have to borrow money. And by borrowing money means they have to take on debt. And this debt is usually coming from the treasury side of things. You can see that this is definitely not healthy. And of course, in terms of personal finance as well, we would not usually like to take on debts just to spend it on things that doesn't give us returns. But no choice, right? This is a country we're talking about. It of course has to come up with programs to help its citizens. Okay, one thing that I don't really get it is why does he focus on this itself when they can actually focus on other areas to increase the income? We should talk about that in the next slide itself. Okay, so this is the question I would like to throw it to you just for a pondering thought, is that if this actually reduces the nation's revenue, how are they going to fund their income? How are they going to fund their programs as well as their operations? Okay, so this is it, more on the corporate tax side of things, not so much big things, but it is actually linked to the next pointer, which I will be talking about, and that is the import tariffs. Okay, why is this linked together? Because as I mentioned earlier on, if their income from one sector or from one area, which is the corporate side of things, is going to reduce, he is also not so ignorant that he don't want to increase his revenue for the country. If you understand this, type in a 1 in the chat. So if some place decrease, some place must increase lah, right? So he thought, hey, okay, for our companies in US, we reduce the tax. Then we look at somewhere else, which is usually external, right? And say, hey, how about we get the external parties to pay more tax with us? And that is where this picture comes in, where he's focusing a lot on the China side and also Mexico side, right? Because they want to make America great again. Yeah, exactly like what Clement actually mentioned. This is it. This is what he's actually proposing, right? For a blanket tariff to actually give a 10% tax, 10 to 20% tax. And then for Chinese companies, we're going to increase the tax by 60% to 100%. For Mexico, we would like to increase from 25 to 100%, right? If I'm a Chinese company importing or exporting into US, I'll be very worried, right? If you understand, if you agree, type like Xiaoshen also give that one worried emoji already, right? And this is what he is proposing, right? He's proposing that right now it's around here, it's around 4-5%, I think, around there. And then he's proposing an increase if you were to factor in the 10% general tariff and 50% for the China, right? It's going to be around like 10 to 15-ish kind of range. And this have a big implications, and it is not looking good. Okay, but anyways, with this itself, right, there are some concerns, and the concerns is that, okay, since you say China, if you can see from this slide itself, you can see that the export over the years is mainly rising. The top two are China and Mexico, which is why he is targeting both of them. And this is actually a good thing for Mexico for now, but of course they are facing some problems, because if China is going to face a 60% tax and let's say Mexico is going to face a 25% increased tax, right? Do you think China would like to move their base to Mexico so that they can get a lower tax? Type in yes if you feel so, and type in no if you don't think so, right? So this is how it actually drives investments from China to the usual route from China to US, now to China to Mexico to US, right? And this is the reason why you can see over the past few years, right, actually recently, right, the China's exports is actually lower than Mexico, because a lot of the Chinese companies are setting up base in Mexico, and Mexico is actually benefiting from this called nearshoring, right? This actually has other implications, because when this tax comes in, no matter where you are from, be it in Mexico or in China, knowing that you'll be taxed more than 10+% to 25 to 60, you of course would think about how you can evade it, and or how to reduce this payments that is essentially money loss. So what a lot of people behaving or thinking right now is that, okay, now we know that it's going to increase, let's start importing right now. Okay, right now, because For example, this is happening last time back in 2018, 2019, is that when there was a tariff announced back in May, a lot of companies decided to stock up first, stock up all of the goods from overseas first before the clampdown, before the tax actually happened. So when there's a demand for products coming into the country, which also means that transportation is going to increase, as in the cost of transportation this goods is going to increase because there's going to be much more goods to be transported, but there's only that limited number of transportation means, right? Which is why after the announcement of this tariff, soon after you can see that the cost or the prices to actually deliver stuff from overseas actually increase, right? Which is not a good sign. What is going to happen is that likely for this case, when Trump's take over and he's decided to implement this tariff, same thing is going to happen, right? Same thing is going to happen, and then cost of your goods is going to increase because of the increased prices of shipments, which then means that consumer at the end usually will have to accept that the products is going to be much more expensive, and this is going to worsen inflation itself, right? So this is a bad thing, right? So coming back to this slide again, why increasing that tax has a potential depression slash recession kind of outlook for me is that back then in 1930s, similar situation actually occurred, right? And back then in 1930s, there was this tariff act called the Smoot-Hawley Act. And what this is all about is that back then, right, it was just 1 year after the Great Depression, right? So the economy was already not doing well, right? But on top of that, the farmers actually face a deeper issue. And that issue is that local farmers in US actually face this issue that people are buying imported like fruits, vegetables, and all the agricultural stuff. And of course, as a president then, he would like to protect the farmers, right? Because without these farmers, the food security is going to be impacted. And as with any country, without food, your citizens can't survive and you will have to rely on external sources, just like the small little red dot Singapore has faced through or is facing right now. Okay, in order to protect these farmers, the job, and have them continuing to be farmers, they needed to make sure that people continue to buy from the US farmers. Okay, so how can they do this? Same thing, they decided to increase the tax for exports of up to, I think, 20,000 over imported products. So it's not just the agriculture stuff, but agriculture plus other stuff as well, lah. Okay, same thing, when there's an increased tax, what's going to happen next? The thing is that's going to happen is that, firstly, let's say, for example, China is not going to be happy because, hey, last time I sell you $1, now you want me to pay $1.60 or pay 60 cents of tax to sell $1 worth of food. Doesn't make sense, right? So never mind. From their side, from China's side, what happens is that from these countries, they also decided that, hey, since you want to tax me, I can also tax you. If you agree, type in the 1 in the chat. When people import into US, they are being taxed. Same thing when US export out, the other countries can also tax US. So it's a mutual lose-lose thing, right? You make me pay more, I make you pay more. So this make the whole situation back then so tense that the whole stock market crashed because firstly, cost of goods increased. Nobody wants to buy, right? That means that your consumption is actually decreased. And together with back then the depression that time, so everything just escalated, which prolonged the whole downturn. And people don't want to trade because you want to tax me, then I want to tax you. Then this became a very drag-ass kind of situation. So after then, when they review again, of course, they have some mutual agreements in terms of how they want to control the tax for countries to countries, which brought them to the current state of less than 5% as of now. Now that Trump wants to increase the tariff back up again, will this likely to happen? I don't know. But what do you think? If you think it will, type in yes. If you don't think so, just type in a no in the chat. So in fact, when Trump was president back then in the 2017 period, so during the trade war especially, China also did the same thing already. They actually said that, okay, you want to increase tax, then we also increase tax for you, lah. It's a clear sign that this is likely going to happen. And it's not just US, it's not just between US, China, and Mexico. They're also even going into the extent of like German companies, the Europe side of things as well. So as you can see, if you were to look at ASML, for example, they are also slightly impacted from it, from this whole news as well. So the share price actually continued to drop back to 600 plus, lower than my buy price of $700. Yeah, so everyone is taxing each other, and I don't think this is ideal. Okay, so this is more on the tech side of things. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope that you have enjoyed and learned something from this segment of our weekly Wealth Pulse sharing. We conduct our Wealth Pulse every Tuesdays 8 to 9 p.m. as we deep dive into the latest and biggest market news and what this means to investors. Do remember to like, subscribe, and also share with more of your friends to support us in making investing easy for everyone to follow. Join us in our community through Wealth Pulse, and I have placed the link in the description box below. I will see you online then. Bye bye.